Did you know that in Europe, there are countries where you are 10 times more likely to be murdered than in others? A shocking divide that reveals a continent moving at two different speeds, even when it comes to safety. In this video, we will take you through the 10 most dangerous countries in Europe, analysing the causes of this violence and the typical profiles of those who commit these crimes. In our ranking, we will exclude microstates and transcontinental countries, but don't worry, at the end of the video, we will take a look at them too. And if you're interested in seeing a comparison with the United States and Canada, be sure to watch until the end, because we have a surprise for you. Welcome to Amazing Europe. Number 10. Albania. Albania, a country caught between modernity and the legacies of the past, faces a complex challenge when it comes to crime. Although data shows an overall decline in crime rates, the situation remains serious, especially regarding homicides. Domestic violence is an alarming issue, and the numbers speak for themselves. Between 2021 and 2023, 32 women were brutally killed, with 75% of cases classified as femicide. A chilling picture of toxic relationships, control, and economic difficulties. But there's more. Organised crime, with its tentacle-like influence, is another key factor. Drug trafficking, in particular, fuels bloody clashes between rival gangs. Albanian criminal organisations, powerful and deeply rooted, control illegal trafficking, especially of cannabis. A significant number of homicides are linked to individuals involved in criminal groups or with a history of crime. And then, a shadow from the past. The Kanun. The Kanun is an ancient Albanian customary code of oral laws. It regulated many aspects of life, but is best known for blood feuds. The obligation for a murdered person's family to take revenge on the killer's family. Today, it is far less influential, but still persists in some rural areas, a cultural legacy clashing with modernity. Adding to the challenge is the sometimes limited effectiveness of institutions in preventing violence and protecting victims, especially women who come forward. Corruption and ties between crime and politics remain major obstacles. Despite this complex picture, Albania is not giving up. There is a growing effort from civil society and institutions like SPAK to combat violence and organised crime. The road is long, but the path is clear. Number 9. North Macedonia. The situation in North Macedonia is not much different from that of Albania. The numbers have decreased over the years, from 3.41 homicides per 100,000 people in 2003 to 1.529 today. But behind this statistic lies a complex reality of domestic violence, organised crime, and fragile institutions. Domestic violence is a deep wound in the country. In 2022 alone, over 1,100 crimes were reported, a 6% increase from the previous year. That same year, 7 homicides were the result of domestic violence, with the most common perpetrators being spouses or intimate partners. But there's another, more insidious killer: organised crime. Criminal groups involved in drug trafficking and migrant smuggling are frequently linked to homicides. For example, a gang smuggling cocaine from South America was suspected of multiple murders, including a double homicide in Skopje in 2021. These groups often have both local and international ties, collaborating with mafia organisations from Albania, Serbia, and other neighbouring countries. And when justice is corrupt and institutions are weak, who can stop the cycle? 78% of citizens don't trust the system. They believe politics influences judges, and impunity becomes the norm. Too many weapons circulate in the country, often becoming instruments of death. Half of domestic murders between 2012 and 2016 were committed with firearms. Men are more frequently murdered in public spaces, while women are most often killed in their homes. North Macedonia is fighting its battle, but to win it must tackle the root causes of the problem: domestic violence, organised crime, corruption, and easy access to weapons. Number 8. Estonia. Estonia has drastically reduced the number of homicides, only 23 cases, including attempted murders, in 2023. This is a positive record, considering that just 20 years earlier there were 147 cases, including homicides and attempted homicides. Now, the average is around 1.536 homicides per 100,000 inhabitants. But behind this success, there are specific problems that require attention. Alcohol is a determining factor. Most murders in Estonia stem from arguments that broke out under the influence of alcohol. Organised crime-related murders are now rare compared to the 1990s, when gang wars accounted for a significant portion of homicides. Today, these cases are few and occur mainly in specific situations. Domestic violence is the other dark side of the coin, with about 41% of women and 33% of men experiencing violence in their relationships. In 2023, 6 homicides or attempted homicides were linked to this context. The victims? Often women, killed by partners or ex-partners, but men and children can also be victims. Social inequality is another factor that must be taken seriously. Although the general standard of living in Estonia has improved, social and economic inequality remains one of the factors driving crime. People with lower education levels or from poorer backgrounds are more frequently involved in serious crimes, including homicides. Who commits these murders? There is no single profile. Middle-aged men are the majority, but there are also young people and the elderly. Often the murderer and the victim knew each other. In Estonia, random attacks are rare, but the real problem remains alcohol. Just think that in 2023, 2/3 of murderers were under the influence of alcohol. Number 7. Luxembourg. Luxembourg, a small state in the heart of Europe with about 660,809 inhabitants, is known for its wealth, stability, and high quality of life. Yet, even in this seemingly peaceful corner, the shadow of homicide looms, albeit sporadically. The number of homicides varies from year to year, and the small size of Luxembourg's population means that even the homicide rate fluctuates significantly. In 2022, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime recorded 10 homicides, bringing the rate to 1.544 cases per 100,000 inhabitants. But what lies behind these numbers? Contrary to what one might think, organised crime and drug trafficking, while present, are not the main causes of homicide. The reality is more complex and often more personal. Domestic violence emerges as a key factor. The home, which should be a refuge, sometimes becomes the setting for tragedies. Arguments, jealousy, financial issues, or addiction problems, family tensions, or even disputes between neighbours can escalate into extreme acts. In 2023, domestic violence interventions increased significantly, reaching 1,057 cases. Then, there is psychological distress, stress, depression, and untreated mental disorders, a dangerous combination that, in rare but dramatic cases, can lead to homicide. These are not hardened criminals, but fragile individuals, overwhelmed by inner conflicts or unsustainable external situations. Of course, drugs are present. In 2022, 3,586 drug-related offences were recorded, though declining. However, most homicides are linked to personal or family conflicts rather than organised criminal activities. In summary, Luxembourg, despite its reputation as a safe country, is not immune to violence that originates within households, feeds on psychological distress, and occasionally intertwines with drug-related issues. Number 6. Kosovo. Kosovo, a partially recognised state born out of a bloody conflict, faces the problem of homicides, fuelled by complex and interconnected factors. Organised crime is a deep-rooted cancer that took hold in the post-war period. Drug trafficking, arms smuggling, human trafficking, criminal groups control these illicit activities, maintaining international connections and local complicities. The northern region, with a Serbian majority, is a hotspot beyond the effective control of Kosovar authorities and with ties to Belgrade. Murders like that of Serbian politician Oliver Ivanović remain shrouded in mystery, hindered by difficult trials and a lack of cooperation between Kosovo and Serbia. But organised crime is not the only issue. Domestic violence, often against women, is another leading cause of death. Then there are botched robberies, unresolved ethnic conflicts, poverty, and unemployment. Impunity is a serious problem. Out of 62 cases of severe violence analysed by the Balkan Investigative Reporting Network between 2018 and 2022, only 11 resulted in charges. Investigations stall, witnesses disappear, and international cooperation is challenging. Even past war crimes, 3,000 Albanians and hundreds of missing Serbs, remain largely unsolved. Why? Institutional weakness, lack of resources, corruption, and political influence. Sometimes, criminal groups have ties to elites, ensuring their protection. For Kosovo to build a safer future, it must tackle these challenges, strengthen the justice system, fight organised crime, ensure security for all citizens, bridge ethnic divisions, and confront its past. Only then can it improve its homicide rate of 1.986 per 100,000 inhabitants, one of the highest in Europe. Number 5. Belarus. Belarus, often called Europe's last dictatorship, presents a complex situation regarding homicides. Not a bloodbath, but a real problem with deep-rooted causes. Poverty, especially in rural areas, is a key factor. Where jobs and opportunities are scarce, crime, including homicides, finds fertile ground. And alcohol, unfortunately, is often the spark that ignites violence. Family disputes, arguments between acquaintances, alcohol amplifies conflicts, turning words into punches, and sometimes punches into murder. But desperation isn't the only cause. Organised crime also plays a role, with gangs fighting for control over illicit activities. Robberies, contract killings, cases like the Polotsk Four or the Mahilo gang, which terrorised entire regions, show that Belarus is not immune to this plague. And then there's the shadow of power. Political assassinations, such as those of opposition politicians Viktor Hanchar and Anatol Krasuski in 1999, cast a disturbing light on the system. Former officials have spoken of orders from above, of extrajudicial executions. Impunity is a serious issue. Weak law enforcement, slow or covered-up investigations, political interference. Justice sometimes seems to never arrive. All of this contributes to Belarus having 2.326 homicides per 100,000 inhabitants, according to UN data. Belarus, therefore, has a homicide problem, driven by social factors such as poverty, alcoholism, organised crime, and, disturbingly, cases that may be linked to extrajudicial executions, a country where violence sometimes goes unpunished. Number 4. Latvia. Latvia, one of the Baltic republics on the shores of the Baltic Sea, has a homicide rate of 2.497 per 100,000 inhabitants. Although decreasing, this number remains among the highest in Europe and hides stories of violence and social distress, often overlooked or underestimated. Most homicides in Latvia have a familiar face, too familiar. They happen within the home, between partners, relatives, and friends. Alcohol is too often the trigger. Arguments that escalate, jealousy, resentment, and financial struggles that end in tragedy. 90% of homicides have a domestic motive, an explosion of rage in a context of social and personal distress that sometimes spirals out of control. Then there is another side, a burdensome past that is difficult to erase, which resurfaces from time to time. Contract killings, those linked to organised crime, revenge killings, and dirty business dealings. Less frequent than in the 1990s, when Latvia, newly independent from the Soviet Union, was undergoing a turbulent transition, but still present. 12 cases in the last 5 years, of which only 3 have been solved. The murder of insolvency administrator Martins Bunkus in 2018 still casts a long shadow and remains a topic of discussion. On the other hand, there are people on the margins, those with a criminal past, the homeless, the unemployed, those with no prospects. They are often the perpetrators of these murders. But even ordinary people, driven by despair, stress, and psychological pressure, can turn to deadly violence. Latvia is trying to change, and fortunately, the police are solving more and more cases, 85% in 2020. But the road to overcoming this issue is long and uphill. Number 3. Moldova. Moldova, nestled between Romania and Ukraine, is one of Europe's poorest nations. In this context of economic and social hardship, crime thrives. Although the homicide rate is decreasing, it still stands at 2.543 per 100,000 inhabitants, a figure that tells stories of violence, often linked to personal conflicts that escalate, sometimes under the influence of alcohol. But there is another, darker, and more organised side to Moldovan crime. It is the face of organised crime, which flourishes mainly in the breakaway region of Transnistria, a sort of state within a state where the laws of Chișinău do not apply, and where local politicians are suspected of involvement in international trafficking. Drugs, human trafficking, smuggling, an underground economy that fuels violence. Then there is the problem of corruption, which infiltrates the highest levels of power. politicians and officials turn a blind eye or are even complicit. Money laundering, fraud, such as the deep fake case, a multi-million-euro international scam orchestrated by a Moldovan criminal group, highlight the issue. The figures speak for themselves. Most crimes, 61.9%, occur in cities, with a peak in the capital, Chisinau, 31.8%. Nearly 27% of these homicides take place in public spaces. Moldova is trying to fight back with prevention programs and new technologies. Efforts are being made to implement facial recognition technology to identify wanted criminals. Additionally, many believe that reducing human and arms trafficking is only possible through stricter border controls. Number 2. Lithuania. Lithuania, facing the Baltic Sea, struggles with violent deaths. Despite progress, the homicide rate, 2.628 per 100,000 inhabitants, remains among the highest in Europe. But what lies behind these numbers? Here too, most homicides occur within the home. Spouses, cohabitants, neighbours, violence erupts where people should feel safest. And alcohol, too often, is the spark that ignites tragedy. It's a cultural and social problem that the authorities are trying to curb, but it remains deeply rooted. Criminologist Maria Schupa argues that Lithuania has a culture of violence and isolation, which may contribute to the high homicide rate. But there is another, even more widespread form of violence affecting Lithuania: self-inflicted violence, suicide. With 27.9 deaths per 100,000 inhabitants in 2021, Lithuania has the highest suicide rate in Europe, a tragic record. It affects men the most, especially in rural areas where life is tougher, opportunities are scarcer, and loneliness runs deeper. The issue is linked to economic difficulties, the lack of adequate mental health services, and a culture that pushes men to tough it out alone, without seeking help. That said, Lithuania's government is not standing idly by. They are tackling both homicides and suicides with legislative reforms, harsher penalties for domestic violence, and improved prevention efforts. Mental health services have been enhanced, especially in rural areas, with support centres and dedicated helplines. These and other measures have led to a significant decrease in both phenomena compared to past peaks. Before revealing number 1 and analysing the situation in the US and Canada, if you found this video informative, we kindly ask you to like, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell to stay updated on our latest videos. This would greatly help us grow our project. Thank you very much. Number 1. Ukraine. First, let's clarify. If we include transcontinental countries, Ukraine does not have the highest homicide rate in Europe, as we'll soon see. Also, war-related homicides are not counted in these statistics. Ukraine, a country shaped by conflict and transformation, is battling an internal enemy: homicide. Before the full-scale Russian invasion in 2022, the homicide rate was approximately 3.843 per 100,000 inhabitants, a number that, despite declining, still reflects violence and social distress. Poverty is a major factor. In 2019, a quarter of the population lived below the poverty line. Without jobs or prospects, some turn to crime, and organised crime is a powerful force in Ukraine, involved in illicit trafficking and violence. In 2020 alone, it was estimated to be responsible for around 10% of serious crimes. Alcohol is another key factor. In 2019, 40% of homicides were alcohol-related. Fights that escalate, assaults, domestic violence, alcohol is the spark that destroys too many lives. And unfortunately, Ukraine has one of the highest per capita alcohol consumption rates in Europe. Then there's the issue of mental health. In 2020, only 10% of the population had access to adequate services. Far too few in a country where past traumas and present hardships can lead to despair. The differences between urban and rural areas are stark. 60% of homicides occur in cities, but rural areas, which are poorer and more isolated, are also affected. Ukraine is trying to change. Legislative reforms, domestic violence prevention programs, and anti-corruption efforts are underway, though only 30% of citizens believe things are improving. But is Ukraine really the European country with the highest homicide rate? If we include microstates and transcontinental countries, the ranking changes. As you can see, our top 10 now includes 2 microstates and 3 transcontinental nations. Among them, Russia holds the highest homicide rate, with 6.799 per 100,000 inhabitants, excluding war-related deaths. But have you ever wondered what this ranking would look like if we included the US and Canada? We have the answer. We've just launched America versus Europe, our new channel comparing these regions with Europe. In one of our videos, we analyse homicide rates in every US state, every Canadian province and territory, and every European country to understand where the situation is most critical. To make the comparison clearer and more intuitive, we've adopted a visually simpler and more engaging format. We're thrilled about this new project, which allows us to explore not just European society, but also North American society, giving us a broader view of their differences and similarities. You can find the channel by clicking on its logo on this page or by following the link in the description. And if this video's topic interests you, don't miss the video on screen, where we examine the most dangerous cities in Europe, not just in terms of homicide rates. That's all for this video. See you next time.